The rain had finally stopped, but the November chill still bit through Thomas's thin jacket as he wiped down the last table near the window. Allegro was quiet now, the last customers having left nearly an hour ago. Only the soft clinks of dishes from the kitchen and the occasional burst of laughter from the staff broke the silence. Thomas glanced at his watch. Almost midnight. Another successful Friday night at his restaurant, though he couldn't help but feel the familiar emptiness that came with success built alone. He caught his reflection in the window. The slight gray at his temples hadn't been there when he'd opened Allegro 5 years ago. The restaurant had been his dream since culinary school, and now it was one of the most popular spots in the city. Yet on nights like this, he wondered if the sacrifice had been worth it. As Thomas reached to turn off the lights near the window, movement outside caught his eye. A man stood on the sidewalk staring in through the glass. Thomas's first instinct was caution. This wasn't the safest neighborhood despite the recent wave of upscale businesses. But something about the man's posture, a certain dignity despite his obviously rough circumstances, made Thomas pause. The stranger wasn't threatening or aggressive. He simply stood there, his gaze fixed not on the remaining food or the cash register, but on something else entirely. Thomas followed his line of sight and realized the man was staring at the baby grand piano in the corner, the centerpiece of Allegro that Thomas had spent 3 months' profit to acquire. "You want me to tell him we're closed?" asked Rita, the head waitress already pulling her coat on to leave. Thomas hesitated. "No, I'll handle it." He walked to the door, unlocked it, and opened it just enough to speak. The cold air rushed in, carrying the smells of the city after rain. "We're closed for the night," Thomas said, trying to keep his voice firm but not unkind. Up close, the man looked even more weathered than Thomas had first thought. His beard was untrimmed, his clothes layered and worn at the edges, but his eyes, clear blue and startlingly alert, didn't match the rest of his appearance. There was no smell of alcohol, no slurring of words when he spoke. "I know you're closed," the man said, his voice surprisingly soft and well-spoken. "I was just admiring your piano." Thomas found himself opening the door a bit wider. "Are you a musician?" The man's smile revealed a chipped front tooth, but it was genuine. "I used to be," he said. Then, after a pause that stretched just long enough to become uncomfortable, he added, "Can I play for food? Just a few minutes of music for whatever you might be throwing out anyway." Behind Thomas, Rita snorted quietly. Chen, the sous chef, had emerged from the kitchen and was watching the exchange with raised eyebrows. Thomas knew what they were thinking. This was bizarre, potentially dangerous, definitely not standard procedure. Thomas should have said no. He had policies about this sort of thing. Allegro wasn't a charity, and opening the door to one person in need meant opening it to all of them. But something in the man's expression stopped the refusal in Thomas's throat. "What's your name?" Thomas asked instead. "Michael," the man replied, then added with a small shrug, "Just Michael these days." Thomas glanced back at the piano. Their regular pianist, a college student named David, had already left for the night. The piano sat silent, its polished surface reflecting the dimmed lights of the restaurant. "You seriously play?" Thomas couldn't keep the doubt from his voice. "I do," Michael said simply, without defensiveness. Chen stepped forward. "Boss, we need to close up. I've got kids waiting at home." Thomas knew he should listen to Chen. Should thank the man, maybe offer him a sandwich to go and lock up for the night. Instead, he found himself stepping aside. "5 minutes," he said. "Show us what you've got." Michael's face registered surprise, then gratitude. He stepped inside, and Thomas caught Rita's eye roll as she mouthed, seriously, at him. Chen sighed heavily but stayed where he was. Lily, the dishwasher, peeked out from the kitchen, curiosity overcoming her usual shyness. As Michael approached the piano, Thomas noticed more details. The man's hands were dirty but not grimy, his nails surprisingly well kept for someone living on the streets. He walked with a slight limp favoring his right leg, but there was an ease to his movement as he approached the instrument. Michael stood beside the piano for a moment, almost reverently, before slowly sitting down on the bench. He adjusted it slightly, a practiced motion, then lifted the cover from the keys. His fingers hovered above them, trembling slightly. "I haven't played a piano this beautiful in years," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. Thomas leaned against the bar, arms crossed, still questioning his own judgment. Rita had stopped pretending to leave and was watching with undisguised skepticism. Chen checked his watch pointedly. "Your 5 minutes started when you sat down," Thomas reminded him, trying to regain some sense of control over the situation. Michael nodded, took a deep breath, and placed his fingers on the keys. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the room, and Thomas felt his breath catch. The transformation was immediate and utterly unexpected. Michael's hunched shoulders straightened, his head lifted, and his hands, those weathered, trembling hands, moved over the keys with astonishing grace and confidence. The piece began softly, a gentle melody that seemed to ask a question. Thomas found himself stepping closer, unable to reconcile the man he'd let in with the music now filling his restaurant. Rita's mouth had fallen open slightly. Chen had stopped checking his watch. Even Lily had come fully into the dining room, drying her hands absently on her apron as she listened. As the nocturne progressed, Michael's body swayed gently with the music. His eyes were closed now, his expression one of complete absorption. When the piece reached its more complex middle section, his fingers danced across the keys with flawless precision, each note perfectly weighted and timed. There was no hesitation, no stumbling, just pure expressive musicality that Thomas had rarely heard even from their regular pianists. The final section returned to the gentle theme of the beginning, but now imbued with a depth of feeling that made it new again. Michael played the last notes with such tenderness that they seemed to hang in the air even after his hands had stilled. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. Thomas realized he'd been holding his breath and let it out slowly. Michael's hands remained on the keys for a moment, then slowly dropped to his lap. When he opened his eyes, Thomas was startled to see tears on the man's cheeks. "Thank you," Michael said quietly. "I'd forgotten how that feels." Rita was the first to break the spell, stepping forward with slow applause that quickly became enthusiastic. Chen joined in, shaking his head in disbelief. Lily was beaming, her usual reserve completely gone. Thomas couldn't find words. He'd heard talented musicians before. He prided himself on hiring good entertainment for Allegro. But this was different. This wasn't just skill. It was artistry of the highest order, coming from the most unexpected source. "How, where, did you learn to play like that?" Thomas finally managed to ask. Michael wiped his face with his sleeve. "Juilliard," he said with a small, sad smile. "Graduated top of my class. Lifetime ago now." The implications of that simple statement, of the journey from Juilliard to homelessness, hung in the air between them. Thomas glanced at his staff, saw the same questions in their eyes that were racing through his mind. "I think," Thomas said slowly, "that we can do better than leftovers. Chen, would you mind cooking one more meal tonight?" Chen, still looking stunned, nodded without his usual complaints. "No problem, boss, whatever you want." "The works," Thomas said. "Steak, roasted potatoes, that special sauce you make, and wine. Open that bottle of Cabernet we've been saving." Michael started to protest, but Thomas held up a hand. "You more than earned it. And while you eat, I'd like to hear your story, if you're willing to share it." For a moment, Michael looked overwhelmed, his eyes darting between them as if searching for the catch. Then his shoulders relaxed and he nodded. "I'd like that," he said softly. "I'd like that very much." As Chen hurried back to the kitchen and Rita began setting a table, Thomas caught Lily's eye. She was still watching Michael with wonder. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas nodded, looking back at Michael, who was running his fingers lightly over the piano keys as if reconnecting with an old friend. "Sometimes," Thomas said, "we find beauty in the most unexpected places," and as he watched Michael close the piano lid with gentle reverence, Thomas knew that tonight was just the beginning of a much larger story. Thomas watched Michael eat with a quiet dignity that seemed at odds with his worn clothes and weathered appearance. Despite his obvious hunger, he cut his steak into small, deliberate pieces and chewed slowly, savoring each bite. He'd thanked Chen 3 times when the food arrived, his eyes widening at the perfectly cooked meal placed before him. The restaurant was officially closed now. Rita had left after helping set up Michael's table, but Chen and Lily had stayed, pulled into the orbit of curiosity that surrounded their unexpected guest. They sat at a nearby table, occasionally exchanging glances that mixed wonder and uncertainty. "This is the best thing I've eaten in... I can't even remember," Michael said, carefully dabbing his mouth with the napkin. The simple gesture revealed years of ingrained manners beneath the rough exterior. Thomas refilled Michael's wineglass. "You mentioned Juilliard earlier. What happened after that?" A shadow crossed Michael's face. He set down his fork and knife, fingers tracing the stem of his wineglass. For a moment, Thomas thought he might not answer. "Success for a while," Michael finally said. "I toured with the Philadelphia Symphony, played solo recitals across Europe, even performed at Carnegie Hall once." His voice softened at the memory. "Standing ovation. My parents were in the front row. Dad cried, first time I'd ever seen that." Thomas tried to reconcile the man before him, eating a free meal after playing for scraps, with the accomplished musician he described. The disconnect was jarring. "What changed?" Thomas asked gently. Michael took a sip of wine, his gaze distant. "Life has a way of unraveling sometimes, thread by thread, until you can't find the original pattern anymore." He set the glass down carefully. "My wife Lisa was also a pianist. Not classical like me, she played jazz, had this incredible ability to improvise. We met when I was doing a residency in Chicago." A small smile touched his lips. "She was playing at a dive bar near my hotel. I walked in to get a drink and heard her doing things with a beat-up old piano that I couldn't do with all my years of training." Lily leaned forward, caught up in the story. Even Chen had stopped checking his phone. "We got married 6 months later," Michael continued. "Built a life together in New York. I taught at a music school. She played gigs and gave private lessons. We had a tiny apartment in Queens with just enough room for 2 upright pianos." He chuckled. "Our neighbors hated us." Thomas noticed Michael's left hand, the faint line where a wedding ring had once been. "She got sick," Michael said, his voice dropping. "Pancreatic cancer, stage 4 by the time they found it." The restaurant seemed to grow quieter. Even the hum of the refrigerators faded into the background. "I stopped taking gigs to care for her, used all our savings for treatments that didn't work. She died 14 months after the diagnosis." Michael's fingers tightened around the wine glass. "I couldn't play after that. Couldn't even listen to music. Every note reminded me of her." Chen shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Thomas saw him glance at his watch, then deliberately put his hand back in his lap, the time suddenly less important. "I started drinking," Michael continued. "Lost my teaching position, couldn't pay rent. The bank took our pianos." He shrugged, a small gesture that tried to minimize the magnitude of his loss. "You can guess the rest. It's not a unique story." But it was unique, Thomas thought. Every broken life was unique in its particular heartbreak. "When was the last time you played?" Thomas asked. "Regularly? Years ago?" Michael's gaze drifted toward the piano. "Sometimes I find places, churches during off hours, music stores. A few weeks back, there was an outdoor piano in that little park on 7th Street. Played for about an hour before someone complained." Lily spoke up unexpectedly. "But you're so good. Couldn't you, I don't know, get work playing somewhere?" Michael gave her a gentle smile. "Hard to get hired when you haven't showered in 3 days and your address is a shelter. Harder still when your resume has a 5-year gap." He gestured at himself. "People see this first. The music comes second if they hear it at all." Thomas understood that reality all too well. He'd made the same judgment when Michael first appeared, at his door. Seeing the homeless man, not the musician. "Where are you staying tonight?" Thomas asked. Michael wiped his mouth and folded the napkin neatly. There's a shelter on Washington Street. If I hurry, I might get a bed. He stood up, gathering his few belongings. Thank you for the meal, and for letting me play. It meant more than you know. Thomas glanced at Chen, who nodded almost imperceptibly. The snow's getting worse, Thomas said. We have a small room upstairs, just storage now, but there's a cot for when staff need to rest during double shifts. You're welcome to it for tonight. Surprise flickered across Michael's face, followed by wariness. I don't need charity. It's not charity, Thomas replied. It's payment. Play for us again tomorrow night. 2 hours, dinner included, and a place to sleep. Hope and suspicion battled in Michael's expression. Why would you do that? You don't know me. I know enough, Thomas said simply. I know what I heard when you played. Chen stood up. I need to get home, but I can show him the room first. Michael hesitated, then nodded. One night, and I'll play tomorrow. After that, we're even. After Chen had led Michael upstairs, Lily began clearing the table. Do you think he's telling the truth about Juilliard and everything? Thomas considered this as he locked the front door. Play like that doesn't come from nowhere. And did you notice his hands? Even after years on the street, they move like a concert pianist's. What happens after tomorrow? Lily asked, stacking plates carefully. I don't know, Thomas admitted. One step at a time. The next morning, Thomas arrived early to find Michael already awake, the storage room tidied, the cot neatly made. He'd used the staff bathroom to clean up, his face freshly washed, hair damp and combed back with his fingers. Coffee, Thomas offered, holding out a cup. Michael accepted it gratefully. Thank you for everything. They sat in the quiet restaurant, morning light streaming through the windows, catching dust motes and golden beams. I had an idea, Thomas said. Our regular pianist only works weekends. We could use someone on weeknights. Nothing fancy, just background music for diners. 3 hours a night, 4 nights a week. Michael's hands tightened around the mug. Are you offering me a job? A trial, Thomas clarified. 2 weeks, see how it goes. We can't pay much at first, but it includes meals and... He hesitated. You could stay in that room until you find something better. Why? Michael asked, the single word heavy with the weight of years of disappointment. Thomas thought about it. He could say it was purely business. Live music increased sales, kept customers lingering over dessert and extra drinks. But that wasn't the whole truth. My father was a musician, he said finally. Played saxophone in clubs around the city. Had a drinking problem, lost everything. I was too young to help him then. By the time I was old enough, he was gone. Thomas met Michael's gaze. Maybe this is me trying to balance some cosmic scale. Or maybe I just know talent when I hear it. Michael set down his coffee. I haven't been reliable in a long time. I might let you down. You might, Thomas agreed. But that piano's been sitting mostly silent for months, and that seems like the bigger waste. A long moment passed between them. Then Michael extended his hand. I'll try. They shook on it, and Thomas felt the calluses on Michael's fingertips. The physical evidence of thousands of hours at the keyboard, the one thing he hadn't lost. That evening, Michael played for the dinner crowd. He'd borrowed a button-down shirt from Chen, too large across the shoulders but cleaner than his own clothes. Thomas had put a small sign on the piano. Tonight, classical piano with Michael Bennett. He'd had to ask Michael for his last name. It had been so long since anyone had used it. At first, customers barely noticed, the music blending into the background of their conversations. But as the night progressed, the talking quieted. People began to turn in their seats, watching the unassuming man at the piano, whose music transformed the modest restaurant into something magical. By closing time, 3 different tables had left extra tips specifically for the pianist. A couple celebrating their anniversary had requested a song, tears in their eyes as Michael played it flawlessly from memory. The owner of a nearby gallery had slipped Thomas her card, asking if Michael would consider playing at their next opening. As the last customers left, Thomas counted the night's receipts, nearly double a typical Thursday. But more meaningful was the sight of Michael at the piano, eyes closed, playing softly for no one but himself, a man who had found his way back to his own heart through music. "Same time tomorrow?" Thomas asked when Michael finally stopped playing. Michael ran his hand lovingly across the piano's polished surface. "I'll be here," he said, and for the first time since Thomas had met him, his smile reached his eyes. 2 weeks stretched into a month, and Michael became a fixture at Allegro. The storage room upstairs had slowly transformed. Thomas had brought, in a small dresser, Lily contributed a reading lamp, and Chen's wife had sewn curtains for the tiny window. It wasn't much, but it was the first space Michael could call his own in years. On a busy Friday evening, Thomas watched from behind the bar as Michael played a lively Gershwin piece. The restaurant hummed with conversation and the clink of silverware, but many diners paused occasionally to glance appreciatively toward the piano. A couple near the window swayed gently in their seats, her hand resting on his as they listened. "We need to talk about a raise," Rita said, sliding up beside Thomas, with an empty tray. "The piano man is bringing in customers. I've never seen this many reservations on weeknights." Thomas nodded. It was true. Business had increased noticeably since Michael started playing regularly. "I'll talk to him tonight." "Good. And while you're at it, maybe mention a shower schedule." Rita wrinkled her nose. "He's better than when he started. But still, I'll handle it," Thomas said, perhaps more sharply than intended. He felt protective of Michael, aware of how fragile this new stability might be. Later that night, after closing, Thomas found Michael at the piano, not playing but making notes on sheet music with a pencil. He looked up as Thomas approached, his face more filled out now after weeks of regular meals. His beard had been trimmed, and though his clothes were still second-hand, they were clean and fit better. "Working on something new?" Thomas asked, setting down 2 beers on top of the piano. Michael nodded, accepting the beer with a grateful nod. "Arranging some modern songs. For piano. Thought it might be good to mix things up, not just play classical all the time." Thomas sat on a nearby chair. "The customers love what you're playing. In fact, that's what I wanted to talk about." He took a sip of his beer. "Business is up since you started. I'd like to make your position permanent, with a real salary, not just room and board." Michael's pencil stilled. "Permanent? With some conditions," Thomas added carefully. "You'd need to be reliable, no missing shifts, and we should get you some new clothes, maybe a haircut." He hesitated. "And about the room upstairs. It works for now, but eventually—" "I should find my own place," Michael finished for him. "I understand. No rush on that," Thomas said quickly. "But yes, eventually. When you're back on your feet." Michael was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the edge of his sheet music. "I haven't had a permanent anything in a long time," he finally said. "Not sure I remember how it works." "One day at a time," Thomas suggested, "just like you've been doing." "What if—" Michael began, then stopped. He took a long drink of his beer before continuing. "What if I can't keep it together? What if I slip back?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken fears. Thomas knew the statistics, knew how recovery often worked. 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, sometimes all the way back to the beginning. "Then we'll deal with it," Thomas said simply. "But I believe in what I've seen these past weeks." Michael nodded slowly. "I accept. And thank you." He smiled, the expression still somewhat unfamiliar on his face. "Never thought playing for food would turn into all this." The following Tuesday afternoon, Thomas was going over accounts in his office when he heard the front door open. They weren't due to open for another hour, and he'd given Michael the day off, his first since starting at Allegro. Thomas headed to the main room and found Lily standing with a middle-aged woman he didn't recognize. She wore an expensive-looking coat, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. "This lady's looking for Michael," Lily said, an uncertain note in her voice. The woman stepped forward, extending her hand. "Eleanor Wright, New England Conservatory of Music. I'm looking for Michael Bennett." Thomas shook her hand, confusion evident on his face. "He's not here right now. May I ask what this is about? Eleanor opened her purse and pulled out a phone. This video, it was posted online a few weeks ago. One of my colleagues recognized him immediately. She pressed play on a video that showed Michael at Allegro's piano, lost in the music, his fingers dancing across the keys. Thomas recognized the piece, Chopin, from that first night. The video was clearly taken by a customer, slightly shaky but with good sound quality. Nearly 500,000 views, Eleanor said, turning the screen toward Thomas. It's been shared in classical music circles worldwide. Thomas felt a strange mix of pride and apprehension. I didn't know about this. Mr. Bennett was one of our most promising graduates, Eleanor continued. His disappearance from the music scene was noticed. Many people wondered what had happened to him. And now you've found him, Thomas said, still processing this new development. Indeed. Eleanor put away her phone. When will he return? I'd very much like to speak with him. As if on cue, the front door opened again, and Michael walked in, carrying a small shopping bag. He stopped short when he saw the visitor, his expression freezing in recognition. Professor Wright, he said quietly. Eleanor turned, her professional demeanor softening slightly. Michael, it's been a long time. Michael looked at Thomas, then back to Eleanor. How did you find me? She gestured vaguely. The internet has a way of making the world very small. You're playing beautifully, by the way. Still, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. Lily mumbled something about checking the kitchen and disappeared through the swinging doors. Perhaps we could talk privately, Eleanor suggested. Michael nodded stiffly. We can use the back office. Thomas watched them go, a knot forming in his stomach. He busied himself with prep work, trying not to watch the clock as 10 minutes stretched to 20, then 30. When they finally emerged, Michael's face was unreadable, but Eleanor was smiling. Thank you for your time, Mr. Bennett. I'll be in touch with those details. She nodded politely to Thomas on her way out. You have quite a treasure playing in your restaurant. After she left, Michael stood still, staring at the closed door. What was that about? Thomas finally asked. Michael walked slowly to the piano, running his fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. She offered me a teaching position at the conservatory. Just part-time to start. Some of their donors saw the video, apparently. Thomas felt a strange hollowness in his chest. That's great news. She also mentioned a small recital, a comeback performance of sorts. Michael's voice was flat, giving away nothing of his feelings about these opportunities. Will you do it? Thomas asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Michael looked up, seeming surprised by the question. I don't know, it's all happening so fast. Thomas forced a smile. It's what you trained for, isn't it? What you did before? Everything? Yes. Michael sat down at the piano bench, his posture automatically adjusting to the instrument. But that was a different life. A different me. You're still that pianist, Thomas said. Everyone who hears you play knows it. Michael played a soft chord, letting it hang in the air. I told her I needed time to think, that I have commitments here. Relief washed over Thomas, followed immediately by guilt. He shouldn't stand in Michael's way, shouldn't want to keep him playing in a restaurant when he could return to concert halls and teaching gifted students. The conservatory is a big opportunity, Thomas said carefully. Better than playing dinner, music for distracted customers. Michael played another chord, this one minor and melancholy. Is it, though? I've been thinking a lot lately about what music is for, who it's for. His fingers found a gentle melody. When I played at Carnegie Hall, people came to witness a performance. Here the music is part of their lives, part of a moment they're sharing with people they love. He looked up at Thomas. I'm not the same person who played those concert halls. I'm not sure I want to be him again. Before Thomas could respond, Chen burst through the kitchen doors, his face flushed with excitement. Have you seen it? The video of Michael. It's everywhere. He held up his phone, showing the same clip Eleanor had played. My cousin in San Francisco called about it. Said the pianist at my restaurant is famous. Michael winced slightly. Not famous, just recognized by some people who knew me before. Before doesn't matter, Chen declared, clapping Michael on the shoulder. Now matters, and now you're here making our little place special. Thomas watched the interaction, seeing how Michael had become part of their small work family. How this unlikely second chance had changed not just Michael, but all of them. Whatever you decide about the conservatory, Thomas said quietly when Chen had returned to the kitchen, you'll always have a place here. Michael nodded, his hands finding the opening notes of the song he'd played that first night. I know, he said softly. That's what makes the decision so difficult. As Michael began to play in earnest, Thomas stepped back, letting the music fill the empty restaurant. Somewhere out there, people were watching Michael on their screens, rediscovering a talent they thought was lost. But here, in this moment, the music belonged only to them. A private concert in the quiet hour before the doors would open, and the tables would fill with people seeking not just food, but connection. And perhaps, without even knowing it, a chance to witness the ongoing miracle of a life being rebuilt, one note at a time. The small recital hall buzzed with anticipation. Every seat was filled, with people standing against the back wall and sitting in the aisles. Thomas adjusted his tie, feeling out of place among the well-dressed crowd of music lovers and industry professionals. Beside him, Lily fidgeted nervously, while Chen kept checking his watch. He should have started 10 minutes ago, Chen whispered. Do you think he changed his mind? Thomas shook his head, though the same worry had been gnawing at him all day. Michael had been unusually quiet that morning, barely touching his breakfast before heading to the conservatory for final preparations. The pressure was enormous. His first formal performance in years, covered by local media and streamed online for those who couldn't get tickets. He'll be fine, Thomas said, with more confidence than he felt. After weeks of deliberation, Michael had worked out a compromise with Professor Wright in the conservatory. He would teach 2 afternoons a week and perform occasionally while maintaining his position at Allegro. The arrangement seemed perfect, a bridge between his past and present lives, but Thomas had noticed Michael growing more withdrawn as today's recital approached. A hush fell over the audience as Professor Wright stepped onto the stage. Thank you all for coming to this very special performance. As many of you know, Michael Bennett was once considered among the most promising pianists of his generation before personal circumstances led to his departure from the classical music scene. She paused, adjusting her glasses. Today marks not just a return, but a testament to the enduring power of music in human life. Please welcome Michael Bennett. The applause was warm and enthusiastic as Michael walked onto the stage. Thomas barely recognized him in the borrowed suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his posture straight and professional. He looked like the concert pianist he had once been, not the man who had appeared at Allegro's door asking to play for food. Michael bowed slightly to the audience, then sat at the grand piano. His hands hovered above the keys, and Thomas could see, even from a distance, that they were trembling. The silence stretched uncomfortably. 5 seconds. 10. 15. A few audience members shifted in their seats. Someone coughed. Thomas held his breath. This was what Michael had feared, freezing under the pressure, unable to recapture his former confidence. Everything they had worked toward these past months hung in the balance. Then Michael looked up, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found Thomas. A moment of connection passed between them. Thomas gave an almost imperceptible nod, and Michael turned back to the piano. The first notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the hall, tentative. At first, then gaining strength, Thomas released his breath slowly. It wasn't the dramatic Rachmaninoff piece listed first on the program, but the gentler, more intimate Debussy seemed to suit the moment perfectly. As the piece progressed, Michael's body relaxed, his shoulders dropping, his head swaying slightly with the music. By the final delicate notes, the trembling in his hands had stopped completely. The audience responded with appreciative applause, and Thomas saw relief wash over Michael's face. For the next piece, Michael surprised everyone by moving to the microphone. I'd like to change the program slightly, he said, his voice soft but steady. "This next piece isn't classical. It's something I've been working on at the restaurant where I play now, a place called Allegro that gave me a second chance when I needed it most." He returned to the piano and began playing what Thomas recognized as a hauntingly beautiful arrangement of a popular song that had been requested often by younger diners. The melody was familiar to many in the audience, but Michael had transformed, it adding complex harmonies and emotional depth that the original recording had only hinted at. Lily grabbed Thomas's arm, squeezing it excitedly. "He's playing my favorite," she whispered. When the piece ended, the applause was more enthusiastic than before. A few younger audience members even called out in appreciation. Michael acknowledged them with a small smile before launching into a powerful Chopin etude that showcased his technical brilliance. For the next hour, Michael alternated between classical masterpieces and his own arrangements of contemporary songs, creating a program unlike any Thomas had heard in a traditional recital. Each piece seemed to tell part of Michael's story, the classical works representing his foundation and training, the modern arrangements reflecting his new perspective on music and life. For his final piece, Michael returned to the microphone. "This last selection is very special to me," he said. It's the piece I played the night everything changed, the night I walked into Allegro restaurant and asked if I could play for food." His eyes found Thomas again. "I was hungry in more ways than one that night. Hungry for a meal, yes, but also hungry to play again, to feel connected to something that had once given my life meaning." He sat down and played the Chopin nocturne that Thomas remembered from that first night. But this performance was different, more confident, more nuanced, infused with all that had happened since. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence before the audience erupted in applause and rose to their feet. Thomas found himself standing with them, his vision blurring with unexpected tears. Beside him, Chen whistled loudly while Lily clapped until her hands hurt. On stage, Michael stood and bowed deeply, his own eyes glistening. After the performance, the reception area overflowed with well-wishers. Thomas, Chen, and Lily hung back, watching as Michael was surrounded by former colleagues, music critics, and admirers. Professor Wright moved through the crowd like a proud parent, introducing Michael to influential people who could help rebuild his career. "Looks like we might be losing our pianist after all," Chen said, sipping champagne from a plastic cup. "He was always meant for bigger things than our little restaurant," Lily added, though her tone was wistful. Thomas watched Michael navigate the crowd with growing confidence. "Maybe, but I think he needed us as much as we needed him." Eventually, Michael broke away from his admirers and made his way to where the Allegro staff stood. "What did you think?" he asked, his expression both exhausted and exhilarated. "You were amazing," Lily gushed. "Even better than at the restaurant." "The suit helps," Chen joked, tugging at Michael's borrowed sleeve. "Very fancy." Michael laughed, then turned to Thomas, waiting for his response. "You found yourself out there," Thomas said simply. "It was beautiful to watch." Michael nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind Thomas's words. "I wouldn't have been on that stage without you, without Allegro." A photographer approached, asking to take pictures of Michael with Professor Wright and the conservatory's director. Before leaving, Michael leaned closer to Thomas. "Don't worry," he said quietly. "I'll be at work tomorrow night, same as always." "You don't have to be," Thomas replied. "After tonight, you'll have offers, better opportunities." Michael shook his head. "I made a commitment to Allegro. Besides," he added with a small smile, "I like playing for people who are eating good food and enjoying their lives, not just sitting in silence analyzing my technique." As Michael was led away, Professor Wright approached Thomas. "Mr. Parker, I wanted to thank you personally for what you've done for Michael." Thomas shrugged uncomfortably. "He did all the hard work himself." "Perhaps," she acknowledged. "But someone had to open the door first." She handed Thomas her card. "The conservatory has a community outreach program. We've been looking for ways to bring music to unconventional venues to people who might not otherwise experience live classical performances." Thomas looked at the card. "What are you suggesting? A partnership, perhaps?" Master classes at your restaurant? Student recitals during lunch hours? She smiled. Michael speaks very highly of what you've created at Allegro. He believes music belongs everywhere, not just in concert halls. I'm beginning to think he's right. Later that night, Thomas sat, alone in the darkened restaurant. The chairs were up on tables, the floor freshly mopped. He could picture Michael at the piano, imagine the music filling the space. Whatever happened next, whether Michael stayed at Allegro or returned fully to his former world, something important had happened here. A life had been changed, perhaps saved. Thomas took out the business card Professor Wright had given him and placed it on the piano. Tomorrow he would talk to Michael about her ideas. Together, they might find a way to open more doors, create more opportunities for music to bring people together. As he turned to leave, Thomas noticed something on the piano bench. Sheet music for a new arrangement Michael had been working. And at the top of the page, Michael had written a title, Allegro's Welcome. Below it, a simple dedication. For Thomas, who answered when I knocked. Thomas smiled, turning off the lights. The restaurant fell silent, but the echo of music, past and future, remained. 1 year later, the line stretched down the block, people huddled against the December chill, stamping their feet to stay warm. Thomas weaved through the waiting crowd, apologizing as he made his way to Allegro's front door. The restaurant had been closed for regular service today to prepare for the special event, and he was running late after picking up last-minute supplies. Is it true Michael Bennett is playing tonight? A woman asked as Thomas fumbled for his keys. Yes, along with some students from the conservatory. Thomas replied, unlocking the door. Do you have tickets? She nodded eagerly, pulling them from her purse. My daughter's one of the students performing. She says Mr. Bennett is the best teacher she's ever had. Thomas smiled. I'm not surprised to hear that. Inside, the restaurant had been transformed. The dining room tables had been rearranged to face the corner where the piano stood on a newly built small stage. Lily and Chen were stringing the last of the white lights across the ceiling, giving the space a warm glow. A hand-painted banner hung above the stage. First annual Allegro Music Scholarship Benefit. There you are, Lily called out, climbing down from her stepladder. Michael's been looking for you. He's in the back with the students. Thomas set down his bags and headed to the kitchen, now serving as an impromptu green room. 6 young musicians sat nervously in a circle while Michael talked quietly with them, his hands moving expressively as he gave last-minute advice. He looked up as Thomas entered. Finally, I was beginning to think you'd changed your mind about the whole thing. Michael's tone was joking, but Thomas could hear the genuine relief in his voice. Just traffic, Thomas assured him. How are our performers doing? A young boy clutching a violin case spoke up. Mr. Bennett was telling us about the first time he played here, how he was nervous too. Michael nodded. I was telling them that sometimes the most important performances aren't in grand concert halls but in unexpected places. He stood up, addressing the students. Tonight isn't about being perfect. It's about sharing what you love with people who want to listen. As the students returned to warming up, Michael pulled Thomas aside. Did you pick it up? Thomas patted his jacket pocket. Got it right here. Are you sure about this? Never been more sure of anything, Michael said. His face had filled out over the past year, lines of worry replaced by smile creases around his eyes. He'd moved into his own apartment 3 months ago, a small place just a few blocks from Allegro, but still played at the restaurant 4 nights a week between his teaching duties. The partnership with the conservatory had flourished beyond anyone's expectations. What began as occasional student performances had evolved into regular music nights, master classes, and now this scholarship benefit, raising funds to provide music education for children who couldn't otherwise afford it. Places, everyone. Chen called from the dining room. People are freezing out there, we should let them in. The next hour passed in a blur of activity as the restaurant filled to capacity. Extra chairs had been brought in, but still some guests stood along the walls. Professor Wright arrived with the conservatory's director and several donors. Local reporters set up cameras in the back. Thomas found himself greeting the mayor, who had heard about the event and decided to attend. Quite a change from our usual dinner service, Rita commented, passing Thomas with a tray of appetizers. She had initially been skeptical about the restaurant's new direction, but had come around when she saw how the music nights increased both customer traffic and tips. In a good way? Thomas asked. Rita nodded toward the packed room. Can't argue with results. At precisely 7 o'clock, Thomas stepped onto the small stage. The crowd quieted, faces turned expectantly toward him. Welcome to the first annual Allegro Music Scholarship Benefit, he began, his voice steadier than he felt. A little over a year ago, a man walked into this restaurant and asked if he could play for food. That moment changed not just his life, but all of ours. Thomas gestured to the side of the stage where Michael stood waiting. Tonight, Michael Bennett and his students will perform for you. Every dollar raised goes directly to providing music education for children in our community who could not otherwise afford it. Because everyone deserves a chance to play, to create, to find their voice through music. The audience applauded as Thomas stepped down and Michael took his place at the piano. The program began with Michael performing a piece he had composed, especially for the event, a melody that seemed to weave together classical techniques with more contemporary rhythms, perfectly capturing the spirit of what they had created at Allegro. Then, one by one, his students performed. Some played with remarkable skill, others with more enthusiasm than precision, but each was met with genuine appreciation from the audience. Thomas watched from the back, chest tight with emotion, as he witnessed what had grown from that chance encounter on a rainy night. Midway through the program, during a brief intermission, Thomas made his way to where Professor Wright stood talking with potential donors. "This is quite extraordinary," she said as he approached. "When I first suggested a partnership, I never imagined anything on this scale." "Neither did I," Thomas admitted. "But Michael had a bigger vision." Professor Wright smiled. "He always did. Even as a student, he saw possibilities others missed." She gestured around the packed restaurant. "This suits him better than the concert circuit ever did. Teaching, mentoring, bringing music to people in their everyday lives." After the intermission, Michael returned to the stage, this time with his most promising student, the young violinist who had spoken in the kitchen earlier. Together they performed a duet that showcased both the boy's raw talent and Michael's sensitive accompaniment. As the final notes faded, Michael stood and addressed the audience. "Music saved my life," he said simply. "Twice, actually. First as a child when it gave me direction and purpose, and then again right here in this room when I had lost everything else." He paused, his gaze finding Thomas in the crowd. "Sometimes we need someone to open a door for us, but we also need to have the courage to walk through it." Michael gestured to his students who stood together at the side of the stage. "These young musicians have that courage. All they need is the door. Your support tonight helps open it for them and for others who might never otherwise discover the gift of music." The audience responded with enthusiastic applause and even more generous donations. By the end of the evening, they had raised enough to fund scholarships for 15 students, 3 times their original goal. As the crowd slowly dispersed and the staff began cleaning up, Michael found Thomas sitting alone at the piano, absently, pressing keys without making sound. "Thinking of taking lessons?" Michael asked, sliding onto the bench beside him. Thomas laughed. "Some talents are better appreciated from a distance. I'll stick to cooking." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as Lily directed volunteers in taking down decorations, while Chen counted the donation box with Professor Wright. "Remember that night?" Michael asked quietly. "When I showed up at your door?" Thomas nodded. "You looked half dead. I was in all the ways that mattered." Michael's fingers found a gentle chord on the piano. "I keep thinking about how close I came to walking past this place, how easily none of this would have happened." "But you didn't walk past," Thomas said. "You stopped. You asked." Michael smiled. "And you said yes, even though every logical part of your brain was probably screaming no." "Best bad decision I ever made," Thomas joked. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, placing it on the piano. "I have something for you. An anniversary gift, you could say." Thomas opened the box to find a set of keys. "What's this?" "Keys to the new space," Michael said. "The building next door. The conservatory board approved the purchase yesterday. We're calling it the Allegro Music Center. Classes during the day, performances at night, and a direct connection to the restaurant." Thomas stared at him in shock. "How? When?" "Professor Wright has been working on it for months. Those donors tonight weren't just here for the scholarships." Michael grinned. "You're about to become part of a musical education complex. Hope that's okay." "It's incredible," Thomas managed, trying to process the news. "There's one condition," Michael added, his expression growing serious. "The main performance space, and they want to name it after you." Thomas shook his head. "That's ridiculous. I didn't do anything. You're the musician, the teacher." "You opened the door," Michael said simply. "When a stranger asked to play for food, you said yes. Everything else followed from that moment." From across the room, Lily called out that a reporter wanted to ask them a few final questions. Michael stood, offering Thomas a hand up from the piano bench. "Ready for the next chapter?" Michael asked. Thomas pocketed the keys, feeling their weight, the tangible symbol of how much had changed, how much was still to come. "Ready," he said, and together they walked across the restaurant floor, past the piano that had started it all, toward a future neither of them could have imagined on that rainy night when hunger and hope had led to an unexpected harmony between two broken lives, seeking a second chance.